Early, 1 minute early, but I think we'll make a start. So, good afternoon and welcome. My name's Roger Horn and I work for URSA, the Employment Related Services Association. We're an organisation that represents organisations who help people into work, and we're really pleased to be partnering with Government Equalities Office, Rocket Science and SQW to bring you this market engagement event for the Returners Fund Round 3. I'm your chair for the afternoon, so my aim will be to make sure that we keep you on time and get you out on time, sort of most important. We've got quite a sort of packed agenda. The format, and I'm sure a lot of you will have been to market engagement events sort of before, but we'll be getting some big picture stuff from the Government Equalities Office, colleague sort of Tara. Then we'll get into some of the technical information around the application sort of process with Rocket Science. We'll have a little break then. We'll see how sort of things are going, but we'll have a little break, and then we'll hear from SQW, talk about some of the monitoring and evaluation requirements, and we've got a big chunk of time left for questions at the end. Now, probably just to say, after Tara's sort of section, if there are any policy related sort of questions, then, because I think you have to leave, so we'll prompt you at that point, but it'll be policy related questions only sort of at that point. We're filming the event. We're not filming you guys, we're filming the speakers, and that will be shared online for those people that haven't been able to attend today. And as I said, I think the most important thing is you leave today with the information you need to put a good application in. So today's your chance to ask questions. There will of course be opportunities afterwards, but you know, you've got a good opportunity here to ask questions and find out everything that you need to know. So without further ado, I'll hand over to sort of Tara and she'll take you off, setting the scene.
I think just debating whether to stand or sit. I think I'll probably sit, make it less rest my legs a little bit. Thank you very much everyone for coming. I didn't necessarily know what to expect. This is my first market engagement event whilst at the Government Equalities Office, so it's really, really great to see so many people in the room. Thank you for showing interest in our policy. So we've got the bottom here, sorry, the previous slide. Sorry. So I'm Tara Fernando, I'm head of the Returners team at the Government Equalities Office. And I thought it would be useful to give a quick intro into what we actually do for those of you who might not be aware of who the Government Equalities Office are. So we're the government department leading work on policy relating to equality issues for women and LGBT people. We also own various bits of equality legislation, and we support and implement international equality measures in the UK, as well as sort of influencing sort of corresponding organisations on equality issues overseas as well. A little bit about our priorities there. You may have heard about sort of one of our biggest areas of work, which is the gender pay gap, improving female career progression, and over the past year or so, I think, putting in place the LGBT action plan was a sort of key piece of our work as well. And I touched on there kind of the influencing we do with overseas stakeholders to kind of share best practice on equality issues overseas. So, I'm the head of the Returners team, as I've already mentioned, but I thought it would be useful to set out for those who didn't know what returners are, who exactly these group of individuals are. So, we define returners as people who have taken at least a year out of work to undertake caring responsibilities and would like to return to the workplace. So note there, I've mentioned people. This returners funding is available to men and women. The reason why Government Equalities Office are interested in it, and we've got the statistic here, is that in practice, 91% of potential returners in the UK are women. So as the organisation responsible for driving forward gender equality, that's why we became involved in it. But I'd like to make it very clear that returners funding is open to men and women. It's just a case that you need to have been out of the workplace for caring responsibilities. Gender is relevant. But I may sort of reference women at various points in this discussion, just because some of the issues that are facing returners are especially felt by women, again, because most of the people who are returners in this country are women. So just wanted to make that clear, the funding's not just for women. So research shows us that carers are more likely to be potential returners if they have dependent children and hold lower levels of the higher qualification. As it says here, 48% of potential returner population either have no qualifications or qualifications to GCSE level. So part of what we want to do is make sure that we're reaching as broad a group of people as possible. And that's sort of an increased focus in this new returners round of funding, which we'll come on to in due course. So why we've chosen to dedicate policy time and energy on returners is because of some of the barriers that they face in coming back to work and sort of fulfilling their potential. There's the structural barriers, so potentially if someone's been out of work for a long period of time, in sort of very bald terms, their skills might not be as current as employers might otherwise be looking for. And again, if you've been out of work for a long period of time, your confidence might be affected by that. I've had a very short period of time out of the workplace for caring. I do not meet the definition of returners. That was just a matter of months, but I felt the impact on me coming back to work after that 2-month period. Then there are the sort of personal reasons. There's the lack of flexible work opportunities and suitable jobs, especially if caring responsibilities are ongoing. A lack of affordable, suitable care, and attitudes and discrimination within organisations where they're not necessarily used to accommodating people who have flexible working patterns or need to get home to look after children or relatives. And there's also the barriers for employers. Part of what we're doing in Returners is looking to embed best practice and sort of bring the message to employers a little bit more. So they might have lack of relevant skills, knowledge, and experience to provide the support that returners need. And also we kind of want, by working in this space, we want to kind of demonstrate the values that, that returners bring to the workplace. If you can sort of make changes in your culture or your working environment, you might be able to use these really sort of experienced group of people. So I touched on it a little bit earlier, why a return is important to Government Equalities Office. So I've covered already, in practice in the UK, the vast majority of returners in the UK are women. We're the organisation charged with improving gender equality. We want to help women fulfil their potential in the workplace. We want to equalise opportunity between men and women. And we want to challenge the social norms which prevent gender equality in public life and in the workplace. We sort of support other government departments on their sort of policies that affect returners and women in the workplace. Shared parental leave, flexible working, owned by other government departments, but we spend a lot of time kind of working with them to sort of respond to stakeholder views. I'll get the hang of this before we look at the session. A bit of an overview of what GEO is doing in this space. So in spring budget 2017, the Prime Minister committed £5 million over 2 years to promote returners and returner opportunities in the public and private sector. The Conservative manifestos to support companies to take on parents and carers returning to work after long periods of absence and back similar schemes in the public sector. So in addition to the Returners Grant Fund, which this round of funding is a sort of component, we also run schemes in the public sector. And we currently have returner programs actually sort of with up and running in key public sector workforces, either up and running at the moment or about to start. Social workers, healthcare professionals, teachers, I won't give away the rest because they're sort of coming down the road, but we do have plans for more schemes in the public sector as well. At the bottom here, we touch on the grant fund. We committed in the region of £500,000 worth of funding to projects already. And the reason you're here today is because in November 2018 we announced an additional £500,000 fund to support returners, but especially focus on returners who face additional challenges and barriers to getting back into work. So, what are we looking for in our projects? This is really key. So we're looking to create new job opportunities within the private sector and target employment. Sorry, that's a typo, I do apologise. That should have just said create new job opportunities within the private sector. We ideally want to support activity that could not be otherwise supported by the market, because why should we throw public money after something that the sort of employers can take care of by themselves? We want to address specific barriers for returners and that can be replicated at scale. And we want to especially encourage applications that can demonstrate self-sustainability beyond the initial funding period. I think that's really key. We want to kind of, like I said, demonstrate to employers that returners are a valuable resource to tap into, and in some cases it's just a case of we kind of need to make that initial case to employers or a sector, for example. Once we step away from that project, the value has clearly been established, and we're really keen because, you know, we're public servants, we're accountable for how taxpayers' money is spent. We'd like to kind of encourage long-term sustainability of projects where possible. And lastly, we want to increase understanding of how to best support returners to gain paid employment, regardless of what the project application looks like. And we want to, like I've said before, support employers to recruit and support returners. Ideally, you know, however long government is involved in returners policy, we want this to be normal in due course. We don't want government to be involved with it forever, because we think this, you know, the Government Equalities Office, we think this is something that should be happening out there in the workplace already. So we're sort of putting our money behind kind of demonstrating that this is good stuff. So on the right-hand side, we're particularly, sorry, I thought someone was asking a question. We're particularly interested in projects that target people with protected characteristics, with people who might face additional barriers to returning to employment, such as victims of domestic abuse, people who may speak little English, people with mental or physical health issues, people with substance abuse issues, or people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. We're also especially interested in projects that are working outside London, but that's not to say we wouldn't be interested in taking forward a project that is based in London. So on this sort of list of characteristics we've got here, it's a sort of renewed GEO focus to kind of make sure that we're kind of broadening the scope of our work as much as possible. It's never been a narrow scope as such, but we really want to sort of proactively make sure that we're reaching out to as many different groups across society as possible. And we're kind of in the early stages of that. That is not an exhaustive list. That's to kind of give you a flavour of what we consider an additional barrier to be. And like I've said previously, we believe that returners in and of themselves, and that sort of singular characteristic, face barriers in sort of in themselves and in the workplace. But there might be people who face additional barriers, and these are examples of what they might be. Like I say, not an exhaustive list. You guys are the experts in this kind of thing. We want to tap into your expertise, really. It's just kind of an indicative set of criteria. And so this next slide sort of taps into it a little bit. I came across it this morning in a colleague's slide pack and thought, ooh, that's interesting. He did not devise this for returners, but this is kind of indicative of where we've kind of touched on the barriers that returners face already and women in the workplace face already. And sort of one end of the scale on the right-hand side, we've got things that affect all women, and at the other end of the spectrum, we've got issues and circumstances that affect some women. So I thought that was just kind of interesting in drawing out what we mean by additional barriers. Again, not an exhaustive list, and you know, I think at some point this where different characteristics sit on the spectrum might have been underpinned by sort of hard numbers, but when I was sort of playing around with it and adding criteria to this, it might not do anymore. So, you know, yeah, I think it's kind of giving you an idea of what I mean, and hopefully that kind of makes sense. Just to make so absolutely clear then, what we're looking for is not just people who have the characteristics on the right-hand side. We're not just looking at returners, we're looking at returners with these characteristics. And I know that's kind of, it might be a lot to sort of different characteristics to get your head around, so I just wanted to make that really clear. And to sum up, this is my last slide. I thought it'd be interesting to touch on why we're actually using grant funding rather than another mechanism. I think I've sort of partly touched on it in that you are the experts in working with returners and people who might face additional barriers to coming back to work. So we kind of want to give you as much scope in developing a proposal that works as possible. We don't want to be too prescriptive, but obviously, you know, like I touched on, public servants, accountable for taxpayer money, we need to give it a bit of direction, and kind of the grant fund mechanism kind of gives the right amount of balance between accountability and autonomy. We really want to increase our knowledge of what works to bring returners back to work at a level commensurate with their skills and experience. And we want to understand, increase our understanding of the economic and socio-cultural benefits of business of running returner programs and hiring returners. So a really important part of any of the projects that we fund is the evaluation. We really want to be able to take away the kind of learnings and the evidence that are sort of gleaned throughout the project cycle, and I think a colleague from SQW will be touching on that in due course, but that's really important because, again, public money, we really need to demonstrate what value we've gleaned from these projects. I don't know whether that was a really quick rattle through my slides, I'm sorry. I haven't put my contact details on here either, but I think if anybody wants them, very happy to sort of send them round after the session.
Yeah, we can add that into the slides or any sort of follow-up notes.
Yeah, and like Roger says, I will have to shoot sort of before the end of the session, but very happy to sort of take
if you've got any sort of policy-related questions for Tara, do put your hand up and obviously say who you are and where you're from. Liz, just beat you, so no, you go first, Liz.
So I was just wondering, looking at the last slide, thinking about trying to look at different industries and businesses. And could you just kind of expand a little bit on, is that you, like, a lot of the women that we work with who fit into that particular category are looking for very particular hours. Okay. Yeah, so I'm sure everybody in this room would have a lot of people want to work between 9:30 and 2:30. So rather than looking at kind of the places where they normally look to be working, are you saying that we need to find other spaces?
So I think the key I think it's sort of up to you a little bit. If you can if you're able to kind of demonstrate why the places you've sort of chosen for those returners to go into, if you can kind of demonstrate why that will meet their needs, why it's valuable for them to go there, what useful things the employer can learn from having returners, because that's also really important as well. Just so long as you can bring that out, I think that's the key thing, really.
So I think with round 1 and round 2, it was more a focus of targeting those sectors where there's particular underrepresentation. I think with looking at round 3, because it is more focused on these people with protected characteristics and returners, adding the sector focus as well, maybe one step too much.
Yeah.
So I think we're a bit more open in round 3 to different sectors being included that may be the more kind of usual suspects in this circumstance.
Yeah.
Okay, it's lady at the front.
Hi, Yvonne Renson from the University of Central Lancashire. Just to absolutely clarify, so on this slide above, when we're talking about, for example, somebody who has mental and physical health issues, so they must also have a caring responsibility in the previous 12 months.
They need to have been out of... Oh, sorry. You can hear the question?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think this lady at the front was just seeking to clarify what this slide means. So yes, you're right. Well, partially. So returners, so someone is returner if they've been out of work, out of the workplace for caring responsibilities for at least 12 months. So that could be someone who's been out for 12 months, it could be someone who's been out for 20 years. The 12 months is important because we wanted returners policy to not focus on people who've been out for paternity or maternity leave, and that was just a kind of useful cut-off point, because I think the challenges that people who've been out of the workplace for longer than, or for a long period of time, there are a different set of challenges for people who've been out for a year. Does that answer your question?
So it's got to be and?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any more? Just that lady there, and then we'll come to you, Shankar.
So we work with offenders, ex-offenders, where women have been out of work or men have been out of work because of precarious responsibilities, but then gone into prison and been out of work even longer. Are they classed as returners still?
If they've worked, yeah.
If they have worked
At some.
in the past,
Yes,
and then
exactly.
have to have time off, and then
Something legal. They worked at something legal.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Shankar?
And Shankar from Swiss Partnership. It was related to that. I'm putting forward an impression I got, which you can disabuse me of if you like. We work with a lot of women who were born in another country, in Bradford and in London.
So Shankar, can you speak up
Yes,
a little?
sorry.
I think the ladies at the back can't.
I'm saying that we work with a lot of women who come from another country, and English is poor, in London and Bradford particularly.
Yeah.
We also separately work with a lot of people with disabilities and mental health conditions. And the feeling that I got is that a lot of these people have not worked in what you might call a proper job. They may have been in work, but they've often had low-paid work, part-time work, and occasional work. I have the impression that this fund was not for them. And this fund was for people who say women, who come in, gone into a job for 5, 6, 7 years, left to have a family, and went back to some professional job. In which case, I think that some of the equalities groups that you've got there are in a slightly difficult position.
I think, that's a really fair comment. And I think I would like to disabuse you of the notion that you've got there. People who we support through the Returners fund, they need to be returning to work. It doesn't have to be full-time work. I think
it's not whether they go to full-time work,
it's
whether they work in full-time work.
no, they don't have to have been doing full-time work, no. No.
They don't have to have been to work previously to return to work.
No, they do. They do. They need to have worked.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to have been full-time work, office work, 9 to 5, nothing like that. They just need to have worked.
It could have been cash in hand cleaning.
I mean, that's a good question that I need to go. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because that's,
yeah.
I don't want to start to write.
Yeah, no. This is
It's
right away. It's
exactly-
good discussion.
Exactly that point.
Yeah.
When the Prime Minister mentioned that
Yeah.
she wasn't thinking of a Somali woman who did occasional cleaning. She wasn't thinking of that. She was thinking of a woman that had been in there, and what a waste. They lost their confidence when they had children. Now, what happens there, that's a perfectly good
Yeah.
plan for investing money. It doesn't really fit with your other hat, your
Yeah.
other equalities hat.
I think that's a sort of fair challenge. The returners' money was specifically set aside for people who've been out of work for caring responsibilities. And I think you're right, there might be a tension between some of these things. I don't think that means that, that means we're not going to be able to find good projects for people who are returning, who have some of these characteristics. I mean, I think that's fair. I don't think it. Sorry, go on.
I don't mean to interrupt again.
No.
We would like you to define
Yeah.
what the worker was in the first place.
So I think
and what it
definitely, I think cash in hand
covers.
with a government. That is difficult for us to quantify. Certainly, is there kind of an additional criterion that you're thinking about?
What if you worked abroad?
Yeah, I think that would be covered, but I'm happy to go back and double
I
check
think my
and
impression
come
is
back.
that would be included.
Yeah.
I think as long as they've had a job, and I think I'm with you thinking about the evidence of the cash in hand element. I think that would be a kind of a difficult one for us.
Doing some childminding from labour for a bit of extra cash because
That
you
would be
can't
difficult.
actually go to
That would be
work.
difficult for
Difficult
evidence.
for evidence.
They're not going to be supported, those people. So
Not through the returners fund.
Okay. So we've got a lady at the back who had her hand up in blue. The two ladies. Oh.
Could you just for definitively put beyond doubt?
Yeah.
Employment previously, is it self-classified or do we need an evidence for it?
That's-
Like for other
Yeah.
ethnicity, gender and all that, it's self-classification.
Yeah.
So for that, please put definitive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can do that and come back.
Yeah, I think we need to kind of go away and discuss with government colleagues just to get a definitive what we mean by that.
So we come
what
back to
evidence
clarification
there is. Yeah.
on these sides.
And
Right.
yeah, if we can send out via Ursa to all the attendees
very
here.
much.
That's fine.
Thank you.
So, lady in the blue top, who's had their hand up for some time?
So, just following on from what the gentleman said, I just wonder if you could clarify, when you say obviously they need to have worked before, I'm thinking about a lot of participants, for example, that I have, that have, say, mental health issues. They've not worked before, they've done a lot of volunteering or maybe they've done a bit of training, but in most cases they haven't been working because they've been too ill to work. So do they have to be in paid work, or could you class them as a returner if they've perhaps been volunteering?
It needs to have been paid work. That is the function of the returners fund. There might be other funding sources available, and it'd be nice for me on a personal level to kind of support a wide range of people. The returners funding was given to the Government Equalities Office on the basis for supporting people who are coming back to work.
Okay.
And sorry, go on. No.
The gentleman's had his hand up for some time. Just in the second row.
Addressing the situation of, say for example, discrimination and bias. We have a group of people who have started out in the educational level when they were younger, but because of things like sus laws, and they've been arrested for things that probably they say they never did, and they've been into the actual establishment, in the prisons. They've come out now in a situation where they're now amongst street. people, street, whatever it is, they look like they're never going to be on the returners because they have been singled out because of bias and because of discrimination. How does the equality office deal with that situation?
So we are the government organisation in charge of equality issues for women and LGBT people. I know this might not be the answer that you're wanting, but other government departments deal with sort of socio-economic equality issues. We support women and LGBT people, and that's what the Returners Fund.
Okay, so they're not eligible.
Someone needs to have been in work.
Okay, I think we've got time for just two more questions. It's this lady here and a lady, well, three. Okay, as long as they're sort of quick.
The question of having worked abroad, I'm thinking of refugees who would have evidence of having worked abroad, men and women. Would they qualify?
If they have or if they haven't got
They
it.
have, some, yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine that's a problem, but I will just go back and double check because I want to be totally sure.
As long as they've had a caring responsibility in that last year.
No, because, sorry, they worked in their country of origin, then they left their country of origin for all the reasons we can understand. They came to the UK, relocated to the UK, and obviously, as you know, that takes some time getting status and permission to work in the UK. But they have evidence that they were formally employed in their country of origin. So would they qualify or not?
If they've been out of work, if there's been caring responsibilities involved in their period.
No, the reason for which they were out of work is that they were waiting for the permission to work in the UK.
It's the care element which is the crucial element here. So they would need to have had a caring responsibility whilst they've been out of work.
So just the fact of waiting for the permission to work in the UK would not qualify them?
No, because so returners are people who've been out of work for caring responsibilities.
Thank you very much. So, thank you.
So there was two ladies over here. Sorry, I'll come back to you, sir. Okay. So did you have a question? Yeah. And then there's a lady behind you as well.
Basically, my understanding is that this money is to create jobs in the private sector. Has self-employment been ruled out, and also the public sector looks at one side?
Self-employment is not included in this. Public sector was your other question, wasn't it? So there are schemes up and running in the public sector. So we run a programme to get social workers back into work. There's currently a teaching programme to get teachers back into work. We just concluded a programme to get returners back in as civil servants. And we're in the process of working through other programs, in various sectors in the public sector. So it's not just the private sector, but there will be like additional activity in the public sector as well.
Can I ask why self-employment is being
Sorry, can you speak up just so we can all...
I'm just trying to find out why self-employment has been ruled out of this programme, because we're talking about flexibility, we're talking about
I think so. The answer to that question is because we want to influence business behaviour as well, and we want to kind of demonstrate to business that employing and working with returners it should be something they should be doing more of, like the flexible working angle, the kind of additional support that might be necessary for returners. So I think if people are sort of self-employed, we can't necessarily, that's the word I'm looking for, glean the benefits to business, if that makes sense.
So we're just a very quick
because we want to influence sort of behaviour in existing organisations.
So there was a lady behind you. I had a question. Then we'll come to the lady at the back, and then this gentleman. Then that'll be we'll call it later this section, right? Because we're running over time. So.
Yeah, I'm just thinking from the ex-offender point of view. Some people go to prison at quite a young age, so they haven't been employed previously. So would employment within prison, paid employment within prison, count for that? Because obviously once they're released,
The issue I can see there is that they wouldn't have been out for caring responsibilities, and that's essential.
So the lady at the back and then this gentleman here, then sorry, that's it.
Get a job in the voluntary sector? If it's voluntary sector and it's like a charity which is still a business, will that be okay, or does it have to be the private sector?
So the previous rounds, round 1 and 2, voluntary sector wasn't included in those ones because the representation of returners in the voluntary sector was comparatively high, and it also was not a focus of this particular funding because it was focused on private sector. I think for round 3, I'm wondering whether, if it is so specific, whether there is some kind of leeway on that for the voluntary.
Perhaps that's another question that we need to come back and clarify, if that's okay.
Can I just clarify something?
Sorry, we've got people kind of sort of queuing, sort of. This gentleman's been. I'll come back to you.
Would a returner have to be registered as unemployed? What about somebody in full-time education, hasn't worked for a year, not registered as unemployed?
The key thing is out of work for caring responsibilities. That's the key thing. Does that make sense? Does that?
Slightly, but it doesn't answer the actual. I mean, would they have to be registered as unemployed?
No.
No. Okay.
I mean, they can be in receipt of,
And full-time education is okay. They were at college for.
Yep, just so long as they've worked previously and they're out of work for caring responsibilities. Sorry, I know there's lots of variables going around. So.
Right, I was going to take the lady behind you, and then that clarification. That will be it then, because we run over. So if you'd like to go.
Mine's really simple. Define older. Do you have an age?
50 plus.
Great. It's not on the list, but it was on the other slide. Is an ongoing caring responsibility an additional complexifier?
They can have ongoing caring responsibilities and looking to return to work. We anticipate there will be quite a lot of people seeking part-time or flexible opportunities in this, so if they can work that around their caring responsibilities.
Would it count as returner plus?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Would you need to have a disability or
so off the top of my head, I'm thinking no. But if your sort of application can make a compelling case that is kind of that's what I'm looking for, an additional barrier, then certainly would be definitely willing to consider it. As usual.
I think is it a clarification?
Just very, very quick clarification. So the objective of this fund is to influence business rather than individuals.
Both.
Both.
I would say
I'm
it's
a
3
returner to work. I'm 50 plus, and I have quite a bit of time off to look after my children. So I would have benefited from this, but I don't need it. But people that really do need it aren't included.
And
that's just an observation.
So part of the policy is linked to the gender pay gap and reducing the gender pay gap, which obviously we've heard this week has actually increased this year. So it wasn't originally the focus of the fund to have these protected groups as the primary focus. It was people who are looking to return to work at a similar level to where they left it. So it wasn't the original focus to have these protected demographic groups, which is the original budget.
That's a different focus, I guess.
Yeah. It was actually as a result of one of the projects funded through round 1, which introduced this as a possibility to go forward and have an additional budget on top of what was promised by Ms. Mem earlier last year. So it is additional.
Right, I think we'll have to call that section to an end. We're running over. Lots of questions of clarification, so we'll come back on, which we'll make sure we do.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to shoot off now. Thank you very much.
There will be more space for questions at the end. We do have a few more slides just to run through to help with the actual application process. So sorry, I'm taking a bit.
No, that's fine. No, if we move on then to an introduction to the online application form, so Jane from Rocket Sites will come up, run through a few things.
Okay, as Roger said, I'm Dana from Rocket Science, and we are the organisation that is going to be administering the fund on behalf of the government.
Sorry, can you speak up a little? Yeah, sorry, we've got a bit of ambient noise.
Yeah. So Rocket Science is going to be administering the grant on behalf of the Government Office for Equalities. So in most cases, we will be your first point of contact, and two other colleagues here today, Helen Fagan, who's our grants manager, and Peter Sajjad, and in some cases you will come through to who picks up the phone, and we will help answer your questions. So we're going to move on to, we've had policy context, and we're going to move on to some of the more practical issues now. So what funding is available and how can you apply for the fund? So under this round, as Charles said, there's £500,000 available for distribution. Out of that, it's likely that only 5 to 7 projects will be funded, and that those will get funding between 50 to 100k. So the maximum ceiling that you can apply for under round 3 is 100,000. I'd just like to ask with a show of hands if any of you here did actually apply or have applied under round 1 or 2. Okay, so there's a few of you. Okay, so well, what's different this time round? Firstly, very evidently, the target group, and this is now focusing much more on those who face more significant barriers to returning to work. The second thing that's different is the application process itself. Previously there was a 2-step application process and we asked for expressions of interest. This time we're going straight to full application, and so you need to have everything sort of fully planned out as much as you can so that you can present to us your full project and we can understand the rationale, what the benefits and how you're going to scale the project up. The other third main difference is around evaluation, because previously with the 2-step process we asked for full evaluation plan for logic model prior to application. This will now be developed, if you are successful, this will now be developed with our colleagues from SQW, the logic model and evaluation plan post-application. So those are 3 of the key changes. The application portal has already opened. Many of you may already be registered on there. You're hearing it here today first. The deadline has just been extended by another few days, so it's the 14th of March and not the 8th as we advertised. It gives a few more days preparation. Give us a little bit of time to adjust the paperwork, the documentation on the portal. We'll have that all adjusted by tomorrow. We should be able to notify you if you're successful by the end of May, and we're looking for projects that would run from starting the 1st of June for a 12-month period. The maximum length your project can last is 12 months, and we would be expecting the returner component of that to be 3 to 4 months. So often that's the work that you would do with returners as such, like the placements and the training. 3 to 6. 3 to 6, sorry, 3 to 6. Okay, so we're just going to talk you through how you apply. You need to apply through the online portal, and this is the website address. I think it was on the information that Ursa kindly sent out, so many of you, as I said, will already have registered. This will be the first page that you come to, and you'll see at the bottom there is a hyperlink here called My Applications. So you will click on that once you've registered to start your application, and it takes you through to the next screen. This will show, if you happen to be submitting 2 applications, it shows all the applications that you've got in, and it also shows, so if you've started, you go to resume. I'd like to draw your attention at the top of this slide to 2 very important documents, the prospectus and what we call FAQs, which is frequently asked questions. They are the core documentation, and I strongly advise you to read through those and gauge whether the fund is applicable for you before even starting the application. The frequently asked questions, if we get a lot of relevant questions at our unit, we will update those and we'll change the date so that we can try and get as much information out to you as possible. The next one shows, you'll see at the top, it says 18% complete, so it gives you an update of how much of your application you've undertaken. I should have said on the other slide, there are 11 sections to the application, and you can go in and work on different sections, and it will give you an update on as to where you're up to. It is very important. We will send a reminder out on the deadline day. The deadline, it closes at 5 p.m. We'll send a reminder out that day, but it is very important that you press submit. And I know that sounds very sort of, might sound a bit patronising, but you've done all that work, and some people do forget to actually submit the application, and we cannot really accept things after the deadline.
Do you want me to run through the weighting? So the weighting is listed within the criteria document that you have. So this is what the assessors are going to be looking for when they consider your applications. So it may be worth paying particular attention at the sections which relate to the pages of the application form that they're going to be scoring more weighted heavy on there. So the declaration, organisation, financial information, they may play a part in terms of your project and looking at the score there, but they don't have their own score. We'll just be using it to determine whether your organisation is actually suitable to run that type of project. Under your project section, we'll be looking for a clear and realistic project plan. We've seen quite a few in the previous rounds which are either too ambitious or not ambitious enough, but not achievable within the time scale, particularly was an issue. So I think it's just an understanding of the people that you're going to be working with and the resources that you need to actually work with those people and get them back into employment. With the about your returners section, which is with 15%, this will help determine the need that you see in your area for the project. So an understanding of your target beneficiaries is what you need to kind of pull out in that section. And similarly with about your employers, that is really important to have those links with employers. We saw in rounds 1 and 2 particularly that they could be really, really strong with the returners that they're working with, and yet not understanding of the barriers to the employers in order to support those returners. So it's the link between the two that we're really interested in with this fund. With the budget area, we're looking for a clear and realistic budget. We expect that management costs will be a part of your budget, so feel free to claim for management costs there. But on the other hand, we wouldn't want to see 50% of the budget that you're looking for to be management costs. We're looking for reasonable levels there. Partnership working is an element. It may be less of a focus for the round 3 than we've seen in previous rounds, but we are looking for you to be building partnerships with the employers particularly. The remaining bits, the remaining 15% under sustainability and replication and the impact and evaluation, Tara already mentioned that those were also important things in connection with this fund, because we're looking for the funded projects to be influencing the policy area. So that is why we need to capture the impact of your project. So organisations with an understanding of how they're going to capture the impact will be really what we're looking for there as well. So I want to just run through as well some feedback from the previous 2 rounds that we have seen. And I have mentioned a few of these things already, but bear with me. So we saw that interest was very high in rounds 1 and 2. We have a success rate about 5% that we're looking at. So round 2 projects, unfortunately, the outcome has been delayed, so we're not able to confirm the exact number of projects that have been funded, but it will be around 5% of those who applied. And the short list of projects tended to reflect a broad geography area, and so we didn't have a quota per area, but it just so happens that they are spread across the UK. across England. And then the round 1 funded projects offer an estimated reach for almost 3,000 beneficiaries and 2,500 employers. So it was actually quite high numbers for the ones that were selected for round 1. And these are the projects that selected for round 1. I mentioned Changing Lives earlier on, which is the kind of influence for this round 3 funding, and that was helping 80 returners in the northeast who have complex needs, so amongst these protected characteristics, in order to get back into employment in that area. We also were able to fund women returners who have done a lot of work in this field with returners. Back to Business Ship, which is a recruitment agency called F1. Were supported for specific kind of the focus of the round 1 and 2 was typically that kind of characteristic, in that it was helping people who have taken a year off for care and responsibility get back into employment at a more professional level. So that was almost the typical project in terms of that. So it's £32,000 awarded there. Similarly, we've got St Helens Chamber, which brought the employers link, who were funded. It was the biggest value for round 1. So it's a Chamber of Commerce who could bring in the networks of the businesses within the St Helens area. And Creative Equals, which had that sector focus amongst the creative industries in the Bristol area, I think that is, and supporting 30 returners getting back to work there with 15 different employers. And so what we found from the applications that we received for round 1 and 2 is that, as is going to be brought up today again, returners as a whole cohort were often misunderstood by applicants, and a lot of applications you could have substituted the word returner for unemployed and it would have read exactly the same. So we are looking for an understanding of what a returner is and using that definition, which is in the criteria, to bring out that. Despite us focusing on outside of London, we did have a lot of London-centric bids still. So we are not ruling out London bids, but we are still looking for a broad geographic reach. Yeah, mostly because there are lots more proportionally returnership programmes within London itself, particularly within the financial sector in London. Most bids we received were for projects 12 months in length, but didn't provide justification as to why they were beyond the extended 3 to 6 months recommended by the Government Equalities Office. We also find very little reference to the points raised within best practice guidance for employers, and these slides will be sent around, and I've included the link to that document within that. That is guidance which was written by the Government Equalities Office in conjunction with Women Returners, the organisation, one of which was actually funded through this programme, and Timewise, in order to pull out best practice for employers in running returnships programme. I would strongly recommend you have a look at that document to see all the things that employers need to take into account when working with returnship programmes. Further areas where some proposals scored low on were sustainability and scalability, and I know the distinction between the two it can be quite blurry, but sustainability is continuing beyond the end of the project. Scalability is rolling out to different geographic areas or in different sectors. We also found, as I've already mentioned, it was the lack of engagement with employers which were a big stumbling block for a lot of the organisations. Unrealistic numbers of people engaged or weak plans of how to engage them were a common theme. And also the number of employment opportunities created. We don't have a magic number, but you can see from the numbers that I quoted about round 1, it will look to try and reach quite a number of people through round 1. However, for round 3, saying that, we definitely anticipate there will be a kind of lower unit cost, higher unit cost for round 3, because they will need extra support in getting back into employment. So we fully anticipate those numbers. I've got one more point, if I get back to you in a second. And also, lack of recognition of the contribution the project can have to the policy context. So I would see this programme as having the 3 pillars. It's returners is one of them, employers is the second, and it's contribution to the policy, which would be the 3rd element of this programme. So we're looking at projects that can do all 3. I know we're asking for quite a lot with a very specific demographic group, but those are the priorities of this particular fund. And sorry, you had a question there.
So when you say employment opportunities, are you talking about you decide to work with 50 participants? Do you mean job starts, or do you mean that what you're looking to do is to create new jobs?
Creating new jobs within
the
private sector, or adapting jobs already in existence for returners specifically.
Okay, so and those jobs, when you talk about that, do they have to be jobs? Does the employer have to kind of validate that, say we weren't doing this, but now we're doing this?
So we would be looking for you to work with employers, and it would be up to you to kind of collect the evidence from employers. I think the definition within the guidance is meaningful employment, so I wouldn't see it as just almost creating a job for no particular purpose, but I think it's more about adapting employers' work in order to support returners. That's how I would see it.
And what about changing their policies? So one of the things I'm particularly interested in is opening up employment to people, kind of just more broadly, to people who are, they're pregnant women, or the people who find it difficult to get a job. Would there be something about looking at people's policies as well as just particular jobs?
Yeah, I think an outcome of this fund is looking at the jobs created specifically. However, I think we would be interested to hear from you within your application as to other elements which need to be tackled, and the policies is one of those areas, and it's an area that's mentioned in the best practice guidance as well, so maybe just try and look at that, I think.
We've got a big chunk of time for questions at the end. We'll take this one question, then we're going to have a quick break, and then move into the last sort of session.
Okay, the question is, in terms of job creation, would that include encouraging employers to take on the returners as apprentices using a levy?
It would have to be paid employment. As long as it's paid employment of some kind, then that's fine.
Okay, we're going to have a quick break sort of now, sort of 10 minutes. If we sort of reconvene at sort of 3:05, then we'll move into the last sort of session. Do save your questions up, so we've got plenty of time at the end for all your questions. Start again. Can I introduce Peter from SQW? He's going to talk about some of the monitoring and evaluation requirements, or evaluation requirements, sorry, of the fund. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you. Hi, so I am Peter Farrer. I'm a managing consultant at SQW, the evaluation partner for the Returners Fund, and I am here today just to talk you through briefly basically who we are, what we are going to be doing with the fund, and what that will look like for any of the projects who get funding from the Returners Fund. So in terms of us, we're SQW, we are a research organisation. We specialise in research to support policy design and implementation, and the team that I am part of have a particular focus on policy, supporting vocational education and training, skills and employability support, return to work programmes. So what we will be doing through the evaluation of the fund is, as Tara touched on earlier, I think as a policy area this is still relatively emerging in that in some particular sectors and with some particular cohorts of returners there are existing schemes like these. For others there has been little or no provision so far, and so part of what we are doing is producing learning that will inform future programmes or future engagement with employers to show what works and what best practice looks like when engaging some of these types of employers or supporting particular cohorts of returners. We'll be producing evidence that can be used particularly for engaging with employers to show what some of the benefits can be or what some of the ways they may need to change hiring practices might look like. And to do all of that, we need an evidence base. So we will be evaluating the Returners Fund as a whole, but also working with each individual project to look at the support being given to returners and the engagement being done with employers, and looking at what has been particularly effective. I think common challenges people are finding in different parts of the country or working with different sectors, and what particularly good examples have been of people managing to overcome those and managing to realise particular benefits for their returners, or managing to achieve particularly strong change with employers. I think it's always worth mentioning with evaluation, because some of you may have experience of evaluating your own projects, and some of you may have been evaluated before, others may not have, but it's not something to be nervous of, in that we're not assessors who are coming in to give you a score out of 10 and come back to the Government Equalities Office and say so-and-so is doing really well, so-and-so isn't, withdraw their funding or anything like that. It's very much a collaborative process about identifying the learning and following along the journey of implementing your projects. It's also about helping people learn from each other. So obviously there will be between 15 and 18 projects that will have been funded across all 3 rounds. They will all have very different experiences, and there may be something that a different project has had particular success with earlier on in their implementation, and it may be something where you are struggling and can learn from that. So it's very much about sharing that learning across the programme, and also with future initiatives like that, so others who will follow you, learning from your own early experiences. It's also, that last bullet, just to note that this is all funded through the Government Equalities Office. It's not something that comes at a cost to you. It's also something that, I think from your point of view, it takes relatively minimal time to engage with us, so it's not a big burden on any one project that we'll be working with. The slides are ever so slightly out of date. Forgive that. Basically, what your engagement will look like with us will be that, I think, as Jane touched on earlier, for those of you who apply and do successfully get funding, we would then start to work with you on a couple of things. So part of that is developing an evaluation plan, which I'll come back to a broad idea of what that will look like for all projects shortly. But we will also work with you to develop something called a logic model. And again, this is something I think some of you may have seen one before, others may not have, but this is, actually, maybe if you go to the next slide and I can just talk you through one. So this is something that it's really useful for us as an evaluator, in that it sets out exactly what you will be doing in terms of the resources needed to support your project, the activities you'll be undertaking, exactly what you will immediately be delivering with those resources in terms of the support given to returners, the engagement with employers, any particular qualifications that returners may achieve through your project, anything like that. And then it sets out as well, longer term, what the benefits of this project are intended to be for your returners, and what changes you would expect to see with the employers you engage. I think it's also quite useful as a planning tool. A lot of the information that goes into this, and again going back to that point about minimal burden, I would emphasize most of what goes into this will be something you already have in your heads or on different pieces of paper, and some of it will have gone into the application form. It's really just about bringing everything together. It sets out a roadmap of what is the challenge we are trying to address, exactly how are we going to go about doing that, and how will we know what success looks like, which I think is another important part of the evaluation. How do we know what a successful returners project looks like? What will the impacts actually look like in practice on returners? There may be hard measures like the achievement of qualifications and getting back into work. It may be softer measures like confidence gained and softer skills for job applications. And again, with employers as well, it could be hard measures like jobs created, employment policies changed. It could also be some softer measures such as cultural change amongst HR teams, more, what would the word be, a better understanding of the values that exist amongst return cohorts in terms of being able to fill skills gaps potentially. So this is something we would work with you on once you've already been given funding, and we'll contact you early on just to make sure that this all gets in place. And then The other thing I mentioned was developing an evaluation plan. So broadly speaking, what we expect the evaluation to look like for each individual project will be, at the outset, we would collect a little bit of data on your returners and on the employers you are engaging with. Then at the somewhere around the midpoint of your project, we would like to come out to visit you just to have conversations with a few of the team who are actually involved in delivering the project and with a few of the returners and employers who you have engaged with, just to find out a bit more about their experiences and how the support has affected them so far. We would then collect a bit more data at the end, going back to that point about some of those hard measures, skills gained, qualifications gained, changes in behaviour amongst employers. We anticipate doing that beginning and end collection of data in the returners case through online surveys. It may be that you have particular, some of the people you're working with don't have access to the internet, or it's difficult to get an online survey out to them, so we can do it by paper. That's something, again, we would work with you on whilst setting up a proper evaluation plan. But basically it's surveys before and after. The midpoint would involve a few consultations, interviews, and again, as we do that final data collection, we would be looking again for you to help facilitate access to some of your returners and some of your employers in the form of us contacting them and having some phone conversations to find out at the end point in your project their final reflections on how effective the support has been, what they have gained from it, and what has gone particularly well and where the challenges have been. I think that's really everything from my point of view as far as the evaluation goes.
Okay. So, I think Helen and the team are going to try and preempt your questions. At least some of them.
I think we've actually already covered some of these, so I will do a skip over some. And that's the first one I'm going to skip over, which is, I think, being covered today. It's returners fund, and it's returners that we're looking for. Another one we've received is, can I submit multiple applications? Yes, you are allowed to submit multiple applications. It has to be for different projects, obviously, and it's unlikely that 2 projects from the same organisation will be funded, but you can do it, you can submit multiple applications. And if you're unsuccessful in round 1, you can apply for round 3. Unfortunately, we thought round 2 outcomes would have been known now, but if you have an application in for round 2, you can also apply for round 3. There is nothing preventing you from doing so. And we've already had the question, I know, about the voluntary sector, so that's one we're going to take away with us to just double check whether we need to expand the definition for the sectors in this circumstance. And again, we've had the question about self-employment as well, we've covered already. We ask in the application form about match funding. It's not a requirement of projects. It can sometimes help in showing value for money, but it's not by any means a requirement to have in place. And if you have secured or looking to secure additional funding, that is absolutely allowed, but the Government Equalities Office would want to be a primary funder still. And in-kind match funding is included in the definition of match funding, so if people are donating building a venue space for workshops, for example, then that's absolutely fine to include in the budget. As I think I've touched on earlier today as well, we don't have a magic number for a unit cost per returner, and we fully anticipate this round 3, because of the groups that you'll be working with, will have a higher unit cost than we've seen in round 1 and 2. But it is down to you to justify why you need that additional support for those individuals. And Jane mentioned as well the expected returners programme length is 3 to 6 months. Again, I referenced the best practice guidance for returner programmes. It does justify why it is 3 to 6 months within that. You can also have project almost inception before that time and project evaluation time after that point, but the actual delivery to returners, 3 to 6 months is the recommended length for that. We will consider applications from partnerships and consortia. Local authorities are also eligible to apply. And we definitely encourage you from building partnerships in your local area if that will help you deliver your project to best effect. And in terms of what focus the geographic area, we anticipate, because of the more niche groups that you're working with, there may be wider geographic areas for this round compared to the previous rounds, as long as you have an understanding of the geographic area that you are looking to support, and we justify that within the application form. And one which we've had quite a bit is the question of having 3 months operating costs in reserve. I think we need to maybe take that away with the Government and Equalities Office, and depending on the number of applications we are seeing, we might need to revise this. And if you determine, if you don't work under the definition of 3 months of reserves, if your organisation works slightly different and calls it something else, I think a one-on-one conversation with myself or one of the team would probably be worthwhile having to see whether we could kind of work around that criteria with your organisation in mind. But please do catch me at the end to follow up with that one. And it is, we were looking for the 3 months operating costs in reserve as a result of the payment structure of this programme, which is, because it's government funding, it's in arrears, but it's in payment instalments of 40%, then the next 40%, and then the final 20% at the end of the project. So only when you've spent 40% would you be able to claim for 40%. So it is a kind of issue of the risk of the cost, the cash flow in terms of your organisation is why we were looking at those 3 months in reserve. And that's the end of the FAQs that I had. I'm sure there are plenty from the floor. I'm going to ask Stephen from the Government Equalities Office just to join us, but I'm sure. So we've got a big chunk of time now, and all those burning questions that I probably stopped you asking earlier. Please put your hand up, and we'll try and sort of get those now. So I'll go for this lady, and then that lady.
Just a quick comment, really, which is, you know the word voluntary in the word VCSC,
yeah.
We don't mean it voluntary. We really are. We are all registered as companies.
Yeah.
So when you're asking the question, it would be great if you can answer.
Yeah, we can clarify. It was because this fund in round 1 and 2 was a private sector focus, and that was the basis for that.
Okay, the lady at the back.
The 3 to 6 months you're saying is the duration of what we're hoping should be the support provided to the candidate?
Yes.
Even though it could be over a whole year that you're delivering the programme, because people are coming in at various points.
If there is multiple cohorts, then that is fine to last longer than a 3 to 6 month period. We would anticipate one cohort, from the projects we've seen funded so far, we'd anticipate one cohort going through, let's say, a 6 month programme, and then maybe you start the next cohort a month before the end of that one, and that would be fine to have almost 2 internship programmes happening over a 12-month period, if you get me there.
I mean, all the projects I've worked on, we work individually as people come in, and we provide this level of support on a one-to-one basis. Sometimes it just forces to get that, but it's duration.
I think as long as you justify why you're approaching it like that, and you've got experience in doing so, and that works, then just justify that in your application.
And if you wanted to say that it needed to be longer than 6 months, particularly for people with mental health issues, would that be considered?
You would really need to justify why. As long as you have a case for that extra support being longer, I think we will definitely be open to hearing from you on that.
Okay, any more? Lady at the front.
You mentioned that the previous kind of successful organisations for round 1 and round 2, there were, I think you said 3,000 returners. How many of them are still in employment, paid employment?
So this is at the start of round 1 delivery. We're still only, Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 months into the project delivering for the main part. So it's still too early days to actually be at the employment outcome.
That's where the sustainability issue comes in. That you effectively wouldn't have an employer who said, I can take somebody on for 6 months and that's it. Sorry, so essentially, it's 3 to 6 months. What's kind of the impact and what is the measure after the project has ended that these individuals are actually still in paid employment?
Correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's a question for you. We've been helping the evaluation impact.
I believe we're particularly interested in permanent employment opportunities. It's good to know where people have been placed into things like apprenticeships and returnships and temporary opportunities, but particularly the sustaining an outcome for a returner into permanent employment is.
Okay. Lady there, then I'll come to you, Lee. Yes, too. Sorry.
Traditionally more from the higher education group. Can I ask about the eligibility costs that are covered by the grant? So, for instance, this particular cohort may well need extra support, financial support to access some of the opportunities of the centralised training, could be training costs, travel costs, childcare costs, whatever it is. So does that include, and also any particular equipment costs that, for instance, if you're thinking of a digital private enterprise, they might want access, they need access to that. So,
yeah, I think all the costs that you mentioned would be eligible to apply for. Things such as childcare costs, and I know someone asked me about carers costs during the break. Those would be eligible, and I think you have a good justification as to why those things are being sought as part of this budget.
Okay. Liz?
That was a big part. Just the other side of it, I think you've got a lot of people in the room who are good at engaging people. So we're out there engaging people, and a lot of people who are relatively small organisations. So they're going to not necessarily have big chunks of employers. There are some organisations. What's the kind of logic for doing it this way, for working with the engagement organisations and getting them to influence the employers rather than kind of the other way round and looking at what employers could do and using organisations like us to engage with people to get them to that point?
Is that one for you?
So this is just one of the strands that we're working on. So we've got the kind of concept of trying to help the returners in, but then we're doing background work in terms of trying to work with the employers to get returners in. So there's a separate, we do the best practice guidance and the toolkits, are just some of the tools that we've created with employers to try and get them to understand who returners are. So we're trying to do both at the same time.
But it's a very small amount of money, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
There's like say you're working with 50 people. Most of us wouldn't find, with the people that we work with, they wouldn't all want to work in one organisation or one sector or one field.
Definitely. Well,
I'm just interested in like what's a project that you funded in the first round that you thought that really hit the target? I think it'd just be useful to kind of.
I don't think there's like a one size fits all. It's like a test.
We all know that's just kind of like what's a model that you're kind of looking for.
I think we're keen to hear from you, which it would be kind of the project that you would put forward. I mean, I'm bringing up the organisations funded with round one, and we actually looked at a varying kind of cohort in here. So there's one which is specifically for the hard to reach groups, there's one specifically in the creative sector, one specifically with the high professional level of projects. So we've tried to get a range of the different programs, returnship programs funded in round one, and we're looking to hear from you guys as to what is out there potential to be funded for round three.
Okay, gentlemen.
Can I just ask how many of the first group of organisations identified their employers first?
So St Helens Chamber had developed networks already because of the status of the Chamber of Commerce. Creative Equals were working with some of the employers, but not all of the ones that they've now since identified. So they're quite good at their kind of marketing. So if you Google returnships and creative employers, you can hear a bit more about the employers that they've since engaged since working on this programme. I would say women returners were more focused on the returners themselves, but recognised that it was a development with the employers that they work with. You probably know that organisation a bit better than I do.
Yeah, so we did quite a lot of engagement with them as well, but I think they actually went away and found a sector that they wanted to focus on more, that they had more experience in, but I don't know the level of experience they had with those specific employers at the time.
And I would say several projects have done like engagement or market warming events quite early on in the project with employers to get them on board, to generate the interest, and then they keep them in the mix and hope that they will be able to offer placements further down the road. We don't know how many of the opportunities will translate to job opportunities, but there has actually been quite a good enthusiastic response from employers generally.
Okay, lady at the back.
What I'm seeing what the project I had in mind is completely changed. Maybe not I'm going to apply for it. It's quite difficult to date. My name is Faiza Rizvi. I'm from Black and Minority Ethnic Carer Support Service. I've worked with people caring for their loved one for the last 20 years. To date, what we were told and we've done is look at the beneficiaries' need and then go and look for employers. It appears, from what I've been told, we slot beneficiaries into the employers. Otherwise, if I'm choosing to deliver 30 beneficiaries, I may have to go and look for 30 different employers or 200, because first I'll assess the beneficiaries' need and their skill set and their aspiration to go into employment, and then go and look for an employer out there. That's the logical way, the logical grid you showed me, the logical way you would work on a project, keeping the beneficiaries' need as a priority, not the employers or the employment market out there. But this one, I don't know, where do we start on this one?
Yeah, so we are looking at partnerships with employers. I think we've said it a few times, and it is because it's shaping policy and changing the approach that employers make. We feel, because you know your beneficiaries in the returners that you work with, you are well placed to shape employers' minds on that.
Okay, so just that lady there, then I'll come to you, Shankar.
I'm sorry that is going back slightly to the question of criteria of eligibility for returners. In the initial list it says ex-offenders, but I understand that it's only these people who've been out of work for caring responsibilities.
Yes.
So the only ex-offenders or ex-prisoners who would qualify would be women who are staying in what's called mothers and baby units in prison, because they are in prison, but at the same time they are looking after their children for 18 months. That's the only offenders who would qualify.
They could have been in prison several years ago and as a result still have an issue in going back to employment, but have since taken time out for a caring responsibility.
So after prison they would have been
caring, yeah.
But the fact of being in prison in itself doesn't qualify men or women.
No, it would be that caring responsibility.
Okay, thank you very much.
Shankar.
Yes, I don't want to be controversial, but it does seem that there is a sort of mismatch here. You know, the question that we're dealing with, I mean, I don't know whether you feel this. I think the equalities hasn't got the right perception about it. All the people we would include in this equalities group are very low-paid workers. I mean, I was just seeing the anomaly that if we were incredibly successful, we would increase the gender pay gap, because more women on low pay would go to work and presumably replacing higher paid men. That was my first assumption. I don't know why it would increase. It would lessen the gender pay gap. It may have no effect on it. The other thing, in the areas we work with, there aren't available jobs. There are people going in to replace people going out. So if you create jobs, this word creating jobs is such a strange expression. If you have a cleaning company, how do they create jobs? They create jobs by sacking their higher paid workers. And so now that's a perfectly viable strategy if we were working with Somali women, to negotiate with an employer how he can cut this expenditure by employing our highly well-prepared women, but it's not the language that you're talking about. If you look at the jobs that you've got there, you've got the legal sector. I can't think of anybody from my background who would, my client's background, actually black or white or anything, who would think of going into the legal profession to return if they come from a background. That would only happen for a certain class of people. And if you go into the equalities group, it doesn't match at all. And I just think, you see, I feel, and this question of geographical concentration, I know, if we're looking at the people who we most like to represent, they will tend to be maybe in London, but in other industrial areas. And we're going to be searching for these people in eligible geographical areas to match it. And there's another feature. A lot of the people who work with these groups are small not-for-profit organisations, and their financial considerations are different. But you see, I think that you've prepared this for a higher paid thing, and you're now trying to extend it to the disadvantaged. And I think you have to convince us that it matches.
So it was the original focus with that 1.5 million originally committed, and this is an additional funding round, which was mostly as a result of looking at the Changing Lives project that was funded in round one, specifically targeting those people who are at risk of homelessness and those with complex needs within the North East. In terms of the geographic reach, though there are more people of certain demographic groups within London, we're not saying it definitely can't be from London. It was just we are looking for a broad geographic range from the projects that are applying.
Employment sectors you would say we were looking at? I mean, have you thought what would be the most likely employment sectors to develop relationships with employers after this group? Have you got a mental list?
So there is a list which I've seen from the Government Equalities Office, which is the sectors which are underrepresented of returners as a whole, which I think we can probably send around. I think that's
so we did have a specific checklist of maybe sectors that we wanted returners to go into, or that could fill like the gaps, or just like STEM industries and stuff where women aren't very represented as much. But I think for round three, we've kind of tried to step away from that now, because we understand that we can't really be restrictive when we're already being restrictive on the characteristics of returners.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, do.
Could the eligible cost therefore fund many of these groups actually to engage with these employers? This seems to be absolutely necessary. You know, the first 3 to 4 months of actually funding employer engagement events for the groups to actually explain the needs and the issues, because there's a best practice toolkit, you know, out there, but unless it comes alive, and people can actually hear case studies, you know, here was someone who was this and now she's, you know, running a fintech bank, and here was this one who was a migrant who's now setting up an, you know, hospitality industry, whatever. So it seems to me that the grant will need to take into account the needs of the sector working with these beneficiaries to actively engage with employers. Is that foreseen?
Yeah, I wouldn't see that as a barrier to apply to the engagement with employers as part of your budget.
Okay, any more questions?
Can I just have one little addition? This question of having reserves of a third of your operating costs, that doesn't happen with small organisations that are exactly your thing. It doesn't happen because, in fact, you actually make yourself ineligible for certain types of grant funding if you have got unused reserves. And also for the type of small, this is fine for the big companies that are going forward, but it would not be in practice. It would be, it's in fact, for certain not-for-profit, it's best practice to keep it near minimum reserves. You can't build up reserves in order to keep yourself going with no income. That's not how it works. And I think that's another mismatch. I understand your thinking about this, but I mean, to begin with, sometimes the income's going up and down. The question is, you need some reserves to manage your project, but you don't need 4 or 5 times the grant value just in order to keep that going. It's absurd. And certainly you won't get the organisations able to apply.
No, we were looking at Charity Commission recommendations in terms of the level of reserves that are recommended. However, we do recognise that in this current climate, a lot of people are running a lot lower than the recommended limit.
The Charity Commission recommendations,
Yeah.
not the not-for-profit sector.
No.
The not-for-profit sector is different from the Charity Commission.
Yeah. Yes.
And the not-for-profit sector doesn't even have that. If you look at anything about what the ideal reserves for not-for-profit, it's very, very vague, but you should aim each year for a balance.
Yeah.
And really, that's a very viable sector. I know it's true of the big charities are vast, I'm saying. And the private sector, if they're very big, they're vast. But you're prescribing conditions that don't apply to the people either you want to attract onto the programme or the people you want to attract to the programme.
Which is why I said on a case-by-case basis, I think we need to rethink that particular criteria.
Lady next to you, please. Then I'll come here.
So I'm an employer. Can I create jobs internally?
That's a good question. I think we need to take that one away, and I'll check the.
Because obviously peer-led program manager.
Yeah.
Highly interesting.
But the answer on the last round was no to that. On the last round.
On the last
That
round,
was asked,
yes.
That was asked. That
Yeah.
same question was asked.
On the last round, yes, but there might be some more flexibility in this particular round.
I think, it's also maybe worth mentioning in terms of changes in employer behaviour. One of the things we're looking at is it's not necessarily just about now we've got 3 new jobs and we're putting returners into them, but it could be affecting some sort of change in employer hiring behaviour. So I've got an existing vacancy and actually now it's being advertised as being open to part-time flexible working, job sharing, and I know that there's ways of working are more lend themselves more to some sorts of roles than others, but that could be part of it. That would be an impact on an employer.
Liz?
So you must be sitting there thinking, all we want to do is give these people money. Why are they so cross with us? I think the issue is, is that Shankara has really made is that actually we can all come up with a way of spending your money, yeah, and I'm sure you'll get some good projects. I think what you need to do for round 4 or the next round is think more realistically about how you could support the group that you targeted here in a more realistic way that will be long-term effective for you. Because I think the way that you're doing it won't necessarily deliver the results that you want. So say, we could all come up with a project here that will fit this, and I'm sure there'll be some, people submit brilliant projects. But if you really want to look at how you help those groups, I think you need to give us longer than the 15th of March, so not this round. And there need to be some discussions with people about how you actually do that. Because I think that what you've got in here is an incredible amount of expertise, as I was saying before, on the outreach. And I think it's about how maybe you could market warm, not between us and you, but maybe how we could market warm between people who really do work with those groups and employers. And I think that kind of long-term going forward, that would be a really good way of kind of creating something, because we all know that these groups can work, but you can't get somebody who doesn't speak English back to work in 3 to 6 months. You can't get somebody who has mental health problems back in 3 to 6 months. And persuade employers to take them on as well. So I think, as I say, I hope you get some really great models, but this is a group that has a different different way of working with it, and I think that we'd all like to come along to the next meeting that you consult on that.
Definitely. My kind of vision was to try and contact you all after this, because GEO doesn't just do returners. We do other kinds of work, and like your expertise would really help with the other kind of policies that we lead on. So it's not just about returners. For you guys, it's about the whole kind of work stream with the equalities as well.
Any other questions, Tom? This is your chance to ask a question. Well, I think we're going once. Going twice.
Would we get all of these slides?
Absolutely, yeah, we'll send the slides, and any clarification will I'll soon go on to the application sort of portal site, but we can sort of circulate them to this group as well as we get them, but just have to make sure that everyone has access to them. Okay, I see people are sort of going. Thank you very much for coming. Round of applause for our speaker. Thank you. Thanks for coming.